The 1990s gave us some of the boldest sci-fi visions ever filmed, worlds filled with danger, wonder, and controversy. But for every blockbuster that thrilled audiences, there were others deemed too dangerous, too disturbing, or too politically explosive to show. These are the stories of 15 banned or censored sci-fi films that left governments uneasy and audiences stunned. 1. Starship Troopers, 1997. When Starship Troopers hit theaters, it looked like an over-the-top space war adventure, but beneath the armor and alien carnage lay a biting political satire. Paul Verhoeven's adaptation of Robert A. Heinlein's novel painted a militarized future where propaganda and patriotism blurred into authoritarianism. The film's gleeful depictions of ultraviolence, paired with a seemingly fascist aesthetic, alarmed critics and governments alike. In several countries, including China, the film was banned outright, not just for its graphic gore, but for what authorities saw as an unsettling flirtation with totalitarian imagery. Even in places where it played, censors demanded cuts, particularly to scenes of soldiers being torn apart in grotesque detail. Verhoeven, who grew up in Nazi-occupied Holland, claimed his goal was to make audiences uncomfortable with how easily war propaganda can seduce a population. But many missed the satire, taking the movie's patriotic fervor at face value. Today it's considered a cult classic and a sharp commentary on blind militarism. Ironically, the very governments that banned it only reinforced the film's warning, that power fears those who dare to mirror its image back at it. 2. Event Horizon, 1997. 3. Crash, 1996. David Cronenberg's Crash was never going to be an easy sell. The film follows a group of people who develop a dangerous obsession, the erotic thrill of car crashes. It's an icy, unsettling meditation on technology, mortality, and human desire, pushing the boundaries of what mainstream cinema could depict. Upon its release, Crash ignited a firestorm. In the UK, it was banned from screening in Westminster, the heart of London's political district. Several other territories, including South Korea, refused to release it at all, labeling it degenerate and immoral. Critics were split. Some saw a masterful work of art, others an exercise in provocation without purpose. But Cronenberg defended the film as a mirror to society's hidden compulsions, asking why people are drawn to danger. The controversy became part of the movie's identity, and over time, it's been reevaluated as a daring, uncompromising vision. For those who saw it during its initial run, Crash wasn't just shocking. It was proof that cinema could still break taboos in an era increasingly afraid of them. 4. The Lawnmower Man, 1992. Long before virtual reality became part of everyday life, The Lawnmower Man imagined its transformative and potentially destructive power. The story follows a simple-minded gardener transformed into a genius through VR experiments, only to spiral into megalomania. While the film's special effects were groundbreaking for the early 90s, it wasn't the CGI that got it banned. In Thailand, authorities deemed the film's digital dreamscapes and depiction of immoral fantasies unsuitable for audiences. In other countries, scenes were cut for sexual content and violence. Adding to the controversy, Stephen King, whose short story inspired the title but little else, sued to have his name removed from marketing, claiming it bore no resemblance to his work. That lawsuit and the bans only fueled curiosity, turning the movie into a cult rental on VHS. In hindsight, The Lawnmower Man stands as a relic of both early VR fascination and the paranoia it inspired. A film that dared to show a world where the line between reality and fantasy vanishes, and power corrupts absolutely. 5. Hardware, 1990. While technically released right at the dawn of the 1990s, Hardware quickly became one of the decade's most infamous sci-fi shockers. Set in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, it follows a scavenger who brings home the remains of a robotic soldier as a gift for his artist girlfriend, only to discover it can repair itself and has a deadly mission programmed into its core. The film's gritty industrial aesthetic drew comparisons to Mad Max and The Terminator, but its bleak political undertones caused serious trouble. In South Africa, the movie was banned outright for what authorities saw as veiled criticism of apartheid-era government surveillance and militarization. The censors claimed it could incite civil unrest. In the UK and US, it faced cuts for graphic violence, including the robot's brutal attacks and scenes of dismemberment. Director Richard Stanley leaned heavily into practical effects, creating a suffocating sense of claustrophobia in the small apartment where most of the film takes place. The violence wasn't just spectacle, it was an extension of the movie's warning about authoritarian control and dehumanization. But to censors in the early 90s, the blend of political commentary and excessive gore was simply too much. Over time, Hardware found a cult audience who embraced its grimy, punk rock sci-fi style. Ironically, the governments that tried to erase it only helped cement its reputation as a dangerous, rebellious piece of cinema, a film that dared to say the future might not be ruled by hope, but by metal and blood. 6. Screamers, 1995. Based on Philip K. Dick's short story, Second Variety, Screamers imagines a war-torn future where autonomous killer machines designed to hunt and destroy enemies have evolved beyond their creators' control. The movie mixes gritty military sci-fi with horror, delivering tense sequences where humans can't be sure if their allies are human or machine. In Australia and parts of Europe, Screamers faced significant censorship for its depictions of dismemberment and sudden, shocking violence. Several territories demanded toned-down edits before the film could be screened. In the Middle East, the movie's grim political subtext, corporate exploitation, endless war, and distrust between factions, was also flagged as unacceptable. While the movie never achieved mainstream box office success, it gained respect among sci-fi purists for its faithful handling of Philip K. Dick's paranoia-infused storytelling. The Screamers themselves, bladed underground burrowing machines, were designed to be as frightening in concept as they were in execution. The practical gore effects, however, pushed it into banned territory in multiple countries. Today, Screamers remains a perfect example of 90s sci-fi that wasn't afraid to combine deep, speculative ideas with brutal, attention-grabbing horror. The censorship didn't erase it. It only made it a sought-after VHS rental for fans hungry for uncut versions. 7. Cube, 1997. Few films have delivered such intense suspense on such a small budget as Cube. The Canadian psychological sci-fi thriller traps a group of strangers in a massive structure made of interconnected rooms, each containing lethal traps. As the characters try to escape, paranoia grows and alliances collapse. While Cube received critical praise for its originality, it was too intense for some markets. In parts of the Middle East and Southeast Asia, the film was banned outright, citing its graphic depictions of death and despair. In other countries, censors trimmed the more gruesome trap sequences, particularly the razor-wire dismemberment scene and the acid-spray death. What unsettled audiences wasn't just the gore, it was the sheer hopelessness. The Cube has no clear explanation, no visible controller, and no escape for most of its victims. That existential cruelty struck some censors as psychologically harmful, especially for younger viewers. Over the years, Cube became a cult phenomenon, inspiring sequels and even a Japanese remake. Ironically, the bans only fueled its reputation as a must-see for fans of dark, claustrophobic sci-fi, a minimalist nightmare that proved you don't need space battles to make an audience squirm. 8. Tetsuo 2, Body Hammer, 1992. If the first Tetsuo shocked audiences with its surreal blend of cyberpunk and body horror, Tetsuo 2, Body Hammer doubled down on the madness. This Japanese cult film follows a man whose rage triggers grotesque transformations, turning his body into a weaponized machine. The film's aggressive experimental style, full of strobe effects, distorted sound, and relentless imagery, was banned in several countries for disturbing and degenerate content. Even where it was released, certain sequences of body mutation and mechanical violence were censored. In Japan, it was marketed as avant-garde art. Elsewhere, it was treated as dangerous transgression. Director Shinya Tsukamoto wasn't interested in audience comfort. He pushed the visuals into a feverish, almost unbearable pace, using stop motion and practical effects to depict flesh merging with steel. For many viewers, the experience was less like watching a movie and more like surviving an assault. While the bands limited its theatrical reach, Body Hammer became a staple of underground film festivals and midnight screenings. To those who endured it, the movie was unforgettable, a raw, unfiltered scream about technology's ability to invade not just our world, but our very skin. Ninth, eXistenZ, 1999. David Cronenberg's eXistenZ blurred the line between reality and virtual reality at a time when technology was just beginning to seep into everyday life. Starring Jennifer Jason Leigh as a game designer on the run from assassins, the film drops viewers into a world where people jack into bioports implanted in their spines, connecting them to organic, pulsating game pods. It was the Cronenberg body horror aesthetic, mixed with philosophical questions about free will, that caught the attention of censors. South Korea outright banned the movie, labeling it as degenerate for its combination of sexualized imagery and disturbing biotechnology themes. In some Middle Eastern countries, it never saw release due to the perceived perversion of its human technology intimacy. While Cronenberg insisted the film was a playful riff on how immersive media could reshape identity, many critics at the time saw it as unsettlingly prophetic. The tactile, almost sensual connection between players and their gaming devices was too much for some audiences in the late 90s, especially when paired with moments of grotesque violence. In hindsight, eXistenZ feels eerily ahead of its time. Its central warning that technology could reshape our perception of reality until we no longer know where one ends and the other begins has only grown more relevant. The bans and censorship may have limited its initial reach, but they also helped cement it as one of the decade's most hauntingly prescient sci-fi works. 10. Johnny Mnemonic, 1995. On paper, Johnny Mnemonic had all the makings of a 90s sci-fi sensation. A William Gibson story, cyberpunk aesthetic, and Keanu Reeves at the height of his star power. The plot centers on a data courier who stores dangerous digital information in his brain, becoming the target of assassins and corporations in a gritty, neon-drenched future. In China, the movie was banned for its portrayal of corporate corruption, technological unrest, and Western influence shaping the future. In other regions, heavy edits remove violent sequences, particularly those involving cyborg assassins and experimental surgeries. Ironically, these cuts also stripped away some of the sharper political commentary Gibson had envisioned. The movie was criticized on release for clunky dialogue and uneven pacing, but over time, it found a cult audience who embraced its campy charm and visionary design. Its depiction of a global internet, digital black markets, and corporate warfare hit much closer to reality than anyone expected in 1995. While Johnny Mnemonic wasn't a box office hit, its censorship history is part of its legacy. In banning it, authorities only drew more attention to its core message. That information is power, and those who control it control the future. 11. Natural Born Killers, 1994. While Oliver Stone's Natural Born Killers isn't pure sci-fi, its surreal, hyper-stylized reality earned it a place among the decade's most controversial genre films. The story follows Mickey and Mallory Knox, two lovers who go on a cross-country killing spree, with the media turning them into pop culture icons. Stone laced the film with satirical sci-fi elements, bending time, space, and perspective into a warped vision of media-obsessed America. It was the violence, though, that made the film infamous. Ireland banned it outright. In Australia, it was heavily censored. In the UK, some cinemas refused to show it. Several crimes were even linked, controversially and debatably, to copycat behavior inspired by the film, further fueling calls for its suppression. Stone defended his movie as a critique of media sensationalism, but the controversy overshadowed the message. By blending a near-future dystopian tone with outrageous editing styles, Natural Born Killers created an overwhelming sensory assault that some saw as dangerous in itself. Today, the film stands as a cautionary tale about both the power of storytelling and the ease with which its meaning can be twisted. The bans only confirmed what Stone suspected, that when you hold a mirror to society's darkest urges, many will try to shatter the glass. 12. Tank Girl, 1995. Based on the cult British comic, Tank Girl was a chaotic, anarchic burst of 90s punk sci-fi. Starring Lori Petty in the title role, the movie follows a rebellious outlaw battling a corrupt corporation in a post-apocalyptic desert wasteland, complete with mutant kangaroo soldiers, outrageous costumes, and a soundtrack packed with alternative rock icons. The film's unapologetic sexual humor, gender-bending style, and unrestrained violence proved too much for censors in several Southeast Asian countries, where it was banned outright. Elsewhere, including parts of the Middle East, the movie was heavily cut for scenes involving suggestive dialogue, innuendo, and the depiction of same-gender affection. Director Rachel Talalay envisioned a wild feminist sci-fi satire, but studio interference led to significant re-edits. Despite this, Tank Girl became a cult hit among fans of counterculture cinema. The bans didn't kill its spirit. They only amplified its status as a film that refused to play by the rules. In the end, Tank Girl wasn't just a movie. It was a riot on film. The fact that it scared censors only proved it was doing exactly what it set out to do: challenge authority, break norms, and make chaos look like freedom. 13. The City of Lost Children, 1995. Jean-Pierre Jeunet and Marc Caro's The City of Lost Children is a surreal steampunk fantasy about a mad scientist who kidnaps children to steal their dreams. Set in a dark industrial port city that feels timeless yet futuristic, it's a sensory feast layered with bizarre characters, eerie machinery, and a dreamlike atmosphere. While critically acclaimed in Europe, the film's haunting tone and unsettling imagery triggered bans in Malaysia, where authorities cited dark fantasy content unsuitable for audiences. Some scenes featuring mutated or surgically altered children were deemed too disturbing, while the blending of fairy tale whimsy with grotesque visuals clashed with local content guidelines. For Jeunet and Caro, the visual world was everything, full of rusted gears, greenish light, and eccentric characters brought to life by Ron Perlman's stoic strongman and Dominique Pignon's multiple on-screen clones. But for censors, the very elements that gave the film its power, the unnatural stillness of kidnapped children, the warped dreamscapes, were cause for alarm. In countries where it wasn't banned, the movie remained niche, attracting art house audiences who reveled in its sheer originality. Over time, it's become a cornerstone of 90s surrealist cinema. Ironically, the bans only made it more alluring, turning it into a whispered recommendation among cinephiles who sought something darker and stranger than mainstream sci-fi would dare deliver. 14. Strange Days, 1995. Kathryn Bigelow's Strange Days is a sci-fi noir set in the final hours of 1999, in a Los Angeles teetering on the brink of chaos. The story follows Lenny Nero, a former cop turned black market dealer of squid discs, devices that record and replay human experiences directly into the brain. The film's depiction of police brutality, political unrest, and explicit violence, combined with its provocative use of virtual reality, made it a lightning rod for censorship. In several Asian communities, it was banned for socially destabilizing content. Even where it was released, many territories demanded cuts, especially to a deeply disturbing assault scene that plays out entirely through the victim's point of view. Bigelow crafted the film as a warning about the dangers of immersive technology and the way power structures exploit chaos. But in the mid-90s, some censors saw it less as a cautionary tale and more as an incitement. The raw realism of its street riots and its unflinching portrayal of corruption felt uncomfortably close to real events. Although it flopped at the box office, Strange Days has since been hailed as visionary, predicting both the social fragmentation and technological obsession of the coming decades. The bans only delayed recognition of what was, in truth, one of the most politically charged sci-fi films of its time. 15. Tetsuo, the Iron Man. Although the original, Tetsuo, the Iron Man debuted in 1989, its international rise and follow-ups, especially during the 90s, cemented its status as one of the most censored cult films in the cyberpunk genre. Shinya Tsukamoto's black and white nightmare of metal fusing with flesh was unlike anything most audiences had seen. Its imagery was violent, sexualized, and deeply unsettling. In the 1990s, as it expanded into global film festivals, multiple countries either banned it outright or screened heavily cut versions. The blend of stop-motion body horror, industrial noise soundtrack, and aggressive pacing was seen as too disturbing for general release. For some censors, it wasn't even about explicit content. It was the total sensory assault, the psychological unease, the feeling that you were watching something unsafe. The Tetsuo series became a rallying point for underground cinema fans who rejected polished Hollywood visions in favor of raw, uncompromising art. It influenced everything from Japanese industrial music videos to Western cyberpunk aesthetics. But its censorship history is a reminder that even in the supposedly liberated world of the 1990s, there were boundaries that filmmakers could, and did, cross at their peril. The 1990s were a golden age for sci-fi experimentation, but also a reminder that not every vision of the future was welcome. These films dared to disturb, provoke, and challenge authority, earning bans that only deepened their legend. Which of these forbidden worlds would you dare to step into?